Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Learning Guild. Today's webinar is From Knowledge to Performance, a cognitive science approach to micro-learning design. Our speaker today is Robin D. Felice. She's a learning entrepreneur and strategist with Rad Learning. She is also an author and presenter with 20 years in the L&D field. She is co-author of Microlearning, short and sweet, and has been researching how long it takes to develop training for over a decade. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Robin. And remember, this is sponsored by ELB Learning, and we have a colleague here from ELB who may be answering any questions in the Q&A or chat, and that is Jennifer Hassel. And so, Robin, when you're ready, go ahead and share. Great. And I told you you'd love your sweets. So I'll be off camera and off mic, but if anyone has any kind of issues, just private message me. All right, Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Karen. I sure appreciate that. I appreciate the Learning Guild and ELB giving me the opportunity to talk with all of you today. So thank you, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're at in the country or in the world, if I have any international folks joining. I surely do hope that if anything, I help you either A, cure your understanding of cognitive design with microlearning or your sweet tooth. I'm not sure which I'm going to achieve today, but maybe I'll do both. So what's all the fuss for today about? We're going to be talking about something around brain-based ways of improving microlearning design. So today what we'll do is we'll explore a lot of microlearning misses, where they miss the mark. And that's not because the content's wrong. I think a lot of us really do try hard with our microlearning to get our content right. But sometimes what we're doing is overloading the brain and not realizing why or how we're doing that overload. So learning, if we think about it, let's just take a moment and think about maybe it doesn't even have to be a piece of microlearning. It could be e-learning. But do we learn in the slides and the videos? The answer is no. We learn up here. We learn in the brain. So we have to remember that that's what's going on. And more importantly, our brain has limits, especially when it comes to how much it can handle at once. And that's where, even though I'm going to talk a little bit of nerd talk with you when I say cognitive load theory, I promise I will sweeten it with easy, fun ways for you to remember what I'm sharing with you today. But what we're really talking about when we say there's limits to the brain, we're talking a little bit about cognitive load theory. And that's based on how our working memory functions, not our short-term memory, that's different, but our working memory. Now, our working memory, it's the processing memory. And it can hold just a little bit at a time, and then it can get overloaded fast. So I'm going to repeat that one more time. Cognitive load theory is about how our working memory functions, how little it can handle, and how fast it can get overloaded. That's really important to remember. Now, let's see. It's Thursday for pretty much the majority of us, I believe. So here's a perfect example. You have standard meetings for today. You have project work you wanted to get done. And then here comes some demands from your client, but you work from home and the electric's out. You have a sick pet and you forgot to pick up the prescription, and it's the last day. And that's the final text reminder you're going to get to pick up your prescription. You can remember everything I just said, right? Well, if you can't, that's because your working memory is doing triage all the time. So if something's done, it goes out of the working memory and something new comes into the working memory, because that's what we're doing all day long. And that's why I kept forgetting my prescription. It was there top of mind in the morning. Text message reminded me, and then more things came in that needed more immediate attention from my working memory, and I kept forgetting it. So maybe some of you feel like me on a Thursday. So now, microlearning, if we're thinking about this again, that's just an example of how things can kind of come at us. Microlearning works best when we work within those limits. So now we're thinking about how do we not work against our working memory? And cognitive load theory helps us to think about that. And we can break down cognitive load theory into 3 types of mental effort. That's intrinsic, extraneous, and germane. And if we design with these in mind, our best, even if we do, so like, let's think about it this way. Even if we design with cognitive load theory in mind, our microlearning can still fall flat because I'm only talking about one aspect of microlearning design today. There are other things that, unfortunately, given the time frame that we have, there's so many more things I could share with you. But if we really talk and take care of this one, I think that we're really helping our people that are taking our microlearning products really focus on some things. So I want to get you hands-on. So get ready with your phone because there will be QR codes coming. Get a little sugar rush. So maybe go find something sweet to snack on because I can't virtually provide you any candy. And I want us to now rethink about how we build content that actually sticks. And I need to
Robin, yeah, I was
advance.
about to say that advance the slides. There we go.
Yeah. So this was for the front slide. I knew where to advance. Unfortunately, I also have to move something here. Just one moment, please. So let's start talking about the three pieces I just told you about. So I wanted to give you a little preempt before I showed you the candy. So I told you you have three mental effort pieces going on at once. We have an intrinsic load, we have that extraneous load, and then we also have that germane load. So now let's look at those pieces here. Let's look at the Smarties first. That's our intrinsic load. That's our symbol for that. Think about complex content being that stack of Smarties, and they're tightly packed together. Now, some material is obviously naturally difficult. If we think about like the language of compliance, that's difficult to a lot of us because that's kind of technical language, and maybe we're not used to maybe jargony, legalese. And then we also have to think about, we have to learn that compliance language to understand the thing that we must comply with. That becomes a complex piece of content for a lot of folks. But we can break that down. We can make that more simple for folks. And if we chunk it, right? So maybe we take a couple of those Smarties and eat them in a stack. I don't know if you did that as a kid, but sometimes I would. And we can also chunk it and space it over time. So for me, I know it sounds weird. I don't know who does this, but I do. But sometimes I eat a half a pack of Smarties and I'll eat the other half later. So we can consume those pieces of information in different ways of breaking it down. We can chunk that. Now, if we move to the middle and look at those Tootsie Rolls, have you ever tried to open a Tootsie Roll in a hot car? You know what happens, right? It's sticky, it's messy, it's got carlin in it. It's the friction and the clutter. That's what extraneous load is all about. It's all this friction and clutter that you're dealing with. I'm probably have people now thinking about the last time they had to deal with a piece of gross sticky candy somewhere. But anyway, it's not about the content at this point. It's about the delivery of that content. So think about when you're looking at a screen of content, was the intro too long? What did I purposely just do? I created extraneous load on the first screen. I purposely read it and waited to move to this slide. So I'm already baking it in here for you. But think about like long intros, or maybe you have unnecessary steps built around the training, or even an over-designed screen. You ever get a new piece of authoring software and just excited to try every feature and it shows up in the training, but nobody needed to have that. That's where we can create extraneous load on the brain. These things overload the brain without helping it actually do the learning. So if you always are changing where the navigation is, that can also create extraneous load for your learner. So we finally have there to the right, we have our Jolly Rancher. It's the germane load. It's the thing we really want to focus on. It's the good kind of learning that we want. It's that effort. So that effort leads to meaning. The germane loads action and function is the effort leads to meaning. Remember that, okay? It lingers and it builds. We encourage this through what do we do to help people really get it, right? We do things like give them examples, or we have them reflect, or we provide them targeted prompts. It's what turns information into application. So I was thinking about this as I was practicing this presentation. I'm like, what do you apply a Jolly Rancher to? And then, of course, I'm dating myself by my age by saying, I remember when Jolly Ranchers were a great addition to a certain malted beverage that was alcoholic in the 90s. So I just told you a little bit about myself there in a dated way. But let me just give you a moment to have a summary and a recap of everything I just shared with you. So if we think about it again, Smarties are our intrinsic load, that complex information, it's already in there. It's part of the task. If you try to remove intrinsic load, you're taking away the meaning of the thing that needs to be learned. The extraneous piece, do not get extraneous design confused with distractions in the environment. Those are two different things. So your working memory is not your short-term memory, and extraneous load is not about the distractions in your environment. That is a totally different thing. Yes, we do have to consider that for microlearning design, but that's not today's conversation. We're just focused on the cognitive learning theory and design. And finally, that germane load. If I'm looking away, it's because I also have a big screen here where I'm showing it to you all on. But this is where the learning happens. So remember that germane is where we want to be. All right, so poll time. What I want to do is have you get out your phones if you haven't already. Scan that on the screen. That is a Mentimeter. It'll bring you in. You do not need an account. But what I really want to know from you all in the room, and on the next slide, I'll show you so that you all, as the attendees, can get a sense of everybody. If you have microlearning in your organization, which piece of candy do you think your content more so aligns with? And I'm starting to see maybe some folks begin to put in their pieces or their pieces of candy. But which is it that you think you are? Are you a Smartie? Are you a Tootsie Roll? Or are you a Jolly Rancher? And I can go back to that screen if we need to, but I see a lot of people coming in now. I think there's a few of you putting in here. We'll see for a moment what we've got going on. Oh, interesting. We've got a lot of extraneous and intrinsic going on. Not as much germane. So we're already, maybe, I like how it's kind of shrinking and going up and down, but we're getting a really good sense of that the microlearning is about the intrinsic. And if we just learn something about intrinsic load, we know that that's complexity. And what we really want to be focused on is the germane piece that we need to learn. And if we've got a lot of it, we've got a lot of extraneous coming next. So that means that we've got a lot of sticky Tootsie Roll sitting around on things. And we really need to get to that Jolly Rancher, right? Okay. Well, thanks for sharing with me. You might want to keep your phones handy because we have another one to go here. So this is the next one. Let me give you a scenario. So now we talked about you and learned a little bit about you. Now let's see if you can identify in a scenario, what do you think is going on here? Well, you can read the scenario yourself because I will create cognitive overload for you if I read verbatim what's on the screen while you're trying to read it. So there's a little bit of a, a sweet little, I wanted to call it a nerd bomb, but I don't want to be too nerdy. But if I do read that for you, it will become something that you will not be able to produce. So the next piece, I'm going to bring it up. I think you've all had long enough to read it. So we know that we've got a little bit of a couple things going on in this scenario. So let's see what you're all thinking. And again, if I need to go back to that slide to let you go. Okay. Lots of right up the middle. And everybody else that's in the other two buckets are like, can I switch my answer? So everybody's seeing it as extraneous load. Perfect. That's what I wanted for you. And if we go back, I'm going to go back real quick. You'll kind of see I gave you a hint. What type of load is likely overwhelming? So part of this is also I'm priming your memory. Remember, I said your working memory is triaging. So if I keep reactivating certain pieces of content for you, you will remember them more quickly, and those will move on to your short-term memory. And if you keep applying them, they will move on to the long-term memory. Now, I'm not saying that's always the process for memory and memory development and retrieval, but that is one of the ways that it can happen. So I'm priming you. I said overwhelming. We know extraneous means overwhelming. So if I come back to this slide, we see that 81 of you agree. That was too much extraneous going on. Great. I'm glad that we've got you going and seeing these things in place. So here's more candy. And now your teeth might be aching, but I have a flexible framework for you because you're like, okay, well, given that already in my microlearning at work, I'm seeing this difference in intrinsic versus extraneous, and I really want to get to the germane. How do I do that? So I want to zoom in here on that cognitive load because we know it's a bigger piece of the puzzle. Now, this framework is not going to solve all of your microlearning design problems. Again, motivation, timing, your workplace dynamics, the context of when somebody is actually taking it, where they're actually taking it. Are they taking it at home? Are they taking it as a frontline worker in a busy place? Those all also add to the microlearning design factor. Again, that's not part of the conversation today. But it doesn't mean that what I'm about to show you or talk to you about is not going to help us control this. This framework is what's in your control. You cannot control the individual in their workspace, but you can control how that content shows up for them. So this framework helps you do that while keeping the cognitive load in mind. So we are going to chunk the information. We will chunk what's too dense. So we already recognize that intrinsic content, that's complex and dense. So we're already probably thinking in our heads, how can we chunk that differently? And then we're going to strip away what gets in the way. So think about a Twizzler and those Twizzler, ropes that you can pull apart. What are we going to strip away that's extraneous, that doesn't need to be there? And then we're going to build what leads to real understanding, which allows the focus to be on that germane learning. So even though I can't hear you or see your wonderful faces, I want you to say, and yes, say it out loud, because again, this will prime your own memory to remember it. Say chunk, strip, build. I'm waiting. I think I heard it. I heard this universal chunk, strip, build. So thank you. Remember, chunk what's too dense, strip what gets in the way, and build what leans into the real understanding that you're trying to get your folks to achieve. Okay, so now that we know about cognitive load, let's put it against different types of microlearning that might be present at your organization or what you hope or aspire to create. So I've got 3 different versions here for you. And I think this should be a helpful way to do this. I know some people don't like hard candy, so I've now sweetened it even better by giving you chocolate. So if you don't like chocolate, and the zero candy bars are white chocolate, I actually don't like those, but I've put them here for a reason. The zero candy bar is for knowledge-based microlearning. That means it's just the facts. And when we as employees do our job, if we have knowledge, we have knowledge. So think of that as the zero start point. Knowledge is great, but it may not pay the bills. But if we move to the payday bar, that's our skills. Skills equals dollar bills. Remember that. This is how you earn your effort, right? We take that knowledge, we take our skills, we put them together to do a job and earn a paycheck. So skills equal dollar bills. Think of it as a payday candy bar. Now, the 100 grand, that's performance based. That means it's valuable, it's fast, it's just in time. Different goals equal different demands. But if you're very competent at what you do and you're already being paid to do it, and you just need a nudge while you're performing because you need to boost that performance, just think of it as the 100 grand version, right? You're going over the limit, you're getting a bonus, and you're trying to do something so that it's perfect. So that's performance-based microlearning. You're giving support in that moment. You're making sure it's just in time and that it can be something they can do that's helping them move their performance along. Knowledge and skills are more about development. Like I will acquire knowledge and I will be able to recall that knowledge. I will develop skills. I will master those skills. When I put them together, I'm performing. All right. So one more recap here, and then we'll do another poll. I just wanted to give you a moment to reprocess the information again. So here's an example, welcome video for knowledge that tells you company, think of onboarding, like, just some of the facts, like here's our culture. This is when we were established. Now think about intrinsic load. We might not think of that information as being complex, but to a new hire, it is. There's density to it. It's something they don't know. It's not familiar to them. So start thinking now about how the microlearning type starts to look against different pieces of the cognitive load theory. So, and we're not in order here when it comes to the cognitive load theory on the screen. We don't see intrinsic, extraneous, or germane. For each example, I'm showing you that, like for skill-based, the germane load is sitting here because it's an interactive walkthrough to request time off. That's germane. That's what we needed to learn. That's the only thing we needed to learn, right? There was nothing else around it. I'm pausing for a moment just to let folks process. So are we ready? I have another poll for you, another scenario, and another question. So let's get to that. Here's the proposed piece on the screen. We have a 90-second microlearning product to create that's about reminding employees how to spot phishing emails. Okay, here's the questions. What microlearning type is it? So what candy, which candy, and what kind of cognitive load matters most? So I'll move over to our poll and we'll see what everybody's saying about it. All right. Lots going on here. So again, just real quick, I'm going to flip back over. We can come back to this one. We're asking what it is. Is it knowledge? Is it skills? Is it performance? And what do we have to do? What do we have to focus on from the cognitive load standpoint? All right, so very little are saying performance. It's really interesting that this trips people up. A lot of folks think it's skill. It's actually performance. Now you're sitting here going, well, why? Why is it not skill? Because this is skill. They're learning a skill. So let's go back over. I'm going to go back over to the slide so you can see this because we have 13 that thought it was performance. Some thought it was complex, intrinsic. So let's look at this again. It's reminding employees how to spot phishing emails. And think about performances in the moment of need. I need a reminder. I'm not pushing this out in a formal way. And this actually comes from a real world example. I was onboarded, took new hire training. Phishing was part of it, phishing and spam and all this email stuff. Well, then a couple weeks later, had a couple of emails come in that were suspicious. And what they actually had in their portal was not for you to go back through the long form e-learning to get to that piece. They actually had a short little micro learning that helped you see all the various things that reminded you of how to spot a phishing email because I'd accidentally opened up one. So this is why it's performance. It's in the moment of need. Now, the word reminding was the key here. It's reminding, it's prompting in the moment. Now, you could use this for remediation as well. That would be for performance, but we would move back to skill because you're helping them to develop the skill. It's not that they didn't have the skill. When you're doing remediation, it's their skill is failing them. For me, I have the skill, but I'm not feeling confident about my skill and I want something to support me in the moment with my performance on it. So that's the distinction I want to make there. Now, yes, that was a little tricky, but we have to think about this from the learner's seat. Are we setting things up to be about skills when we want it to be performance? Are we setting things up for performance but making it intrinsic? We have to think about how we're designing the microlearning. So that's why I did that little trick. Okay. So we kind of settled out there. So remember, we have something that's going to help us with these things. It's all about the chunking, the stripping, and the building. So here we have a really good example. And I'm pausing here for a moment because the QR code is not attached to another Mentimeter for you all. It's actually attached to a downloadable PDF, and I'm going to pull that up for you. And hopefully you can see that on my screen. Can I have a check or a thumbs up that you can see this on my screen? So folks, you don't need Dropbox to get to it, but it is a free PDF. It will be sitting there. It will also be put into the chat for you. And if you come back to play this again and forgot to download it or could not download it today, it is available as you watch the presentation. If you hit the QR code, I have it so that this file does not expire until July. So you have a little bit of time to look at this. But what I've created for you, and I'll reduce this a little bit, is it's the chunk strip build, your way to better microlearning. So I'm taking all the pieces we've been discussing today, and I've put them in here with some design tips. I've given you examples, and 3 common examples that I've seen over and over again for folks is training, microlearning being used for compliance, and onboarding and leadership. So I wanted to give you some examples of some very common ways that folks are utilizing microlearning. And then if you want to explore more, I caution you, this is an AI prompt I give you. The reason why I caution you is please remember that AI can get things wrong. So don't just rely on AI for everything because, hey, Robin DeFelice gave me this prompt and it works. The reality is that you might need to do some massaging of that for your own edification. But you can use this, explain how I need to do X for my company and how I want to do it with this microlearning piece. You can even take this PDF and you can upload it into your chat, and it can be a reference tool and say, given the information here, given my example, how does this microlearning type and which type of cognitive load should I be cognizant of? You could even right now probably go back for those that have the intrinsic and the extraneous as the majority of your microlearning products. You could probably go in and ask it some information based off of that to figure out how you can use the chunk, strip, build method to remove that and redesign your microlearning for greater effect. So this is there. I wanted to bring that up because I wanted us to be able to think about this scenario. Somebody says to you, we need a microlearning to help managers prepare for an annual performance conversation. Now so what I'm hoping to do now is use a little bit of the chat and see what you all are thinking, because I haven't been able to do that. So I wanted to spend some focused time on this example with you. Oh, well, that's unfortunate to hear. Okay, well,
I'm working on correcting that right now. That's the only thing that got posted was the cover, but give me a minute and I'll be able to get the entire handout up.
okay. So for those that downloaded it, is it also an issue, or were you able to see it? I see some thumbs ups rolling around that the one that you're downloading off of the QR code on screen. Oh, how interesting. The QR code works. Perfect. Okay, great. Yes, if it's in the chat, that one will be fixed. If you're getting it from the QR code on screen, it should work for you. And yes, thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. So ELB is obviously, because you've signed up, you will also have help, or it will come with the slides. You will get the slides, plus you will get the handout as well. So maybe I can do a split screen here. Maybe I can do something that allows us to see both for those that aren't having a good time trying to get things there. Whoops, I wanted to get rid of that completely. Okay, well, I'm making it worse. I do apologize for that. What do we think in chat?
The
We
new
have,
the new
oh,
handout has been posted, so it should be complete now.
perfect, thank you. We'll pause for a moment to get that going. Okay, so Diana saying she would chunk this into actions and expectations, strip the motivational videos, and build up actions. Okay. I love it. We already have one in. And again, if you have questions, okay, Dolores is agreeing. So folks, okay, great. Thank you for letting us know, Melissa, that these work. Yes, there might be a cover. If you just downloaded it, there should be a cover and then a page that I created. I don't believe my document's more than 2. It should just be this. And if we zoom in on this piece, it sounds like we have one in saying they would chunk it into action. So you've been handed a slide deck, you have motivational videos, you have a 5-minute clip of a past panel on performance culture, and you have microlearning to help managers prepare for an annual performance conversations. BP, very good point. Like, what, right? Like it's a kid in a candy store, no pun intended for the day, right? It's like, what's this candy doing with this candy? It doesn't make any sense, right? Okay. Is that, I'm sorry, I cannot see it. If that's Talita, I hope I'm saying your name correct. You would strip out the definitions. You would get a couple of stats with quotes for motivational videos, and then real scenario quizzes. Okay. And if anybody's questioning, what is an annual performance conversation? Annual performance reviews. So we're trying to help managers prepare to maybe have a difficult conversation Maybe they need to do a write-up and we need it to be a helpful write-up. So we wrote conversations. So we're very focused on one thing that we want to learn, right, from a germane standpoint. And is it that we really need to learn it, or do we already know it? So that starts to tell you about which type. So let's think about that intrinsic piece. So we've had some people do the chunk strip build. Why don't we go back and ask that question now? What do you think it is? Is this request from the stakeholders? Is this an intrinsic load issue, an extraneous, or germane right now, given the content you've been given in the request? What do you think you've got going on? And it can be more than one. It doesn't mean that it can just be intrinsic. It could be intrinsic and germane. It could be intrinsic and extraneous. What are we thinking? Let's see what you have going on in the chat. Okay, Elizabeth thinks it's germane and intrinsic. What else do we think it is, folks? Okay, so a lot of folks, I'm starting to see the germane and intrinsic come in a little bit more. All right, so there is complexity in this topic, right? You're about to have an annual performance conversation. So by nature, that has complexity to it because it's just not, this is how you have a conversation. We have to think about emotional intelligence, which I believe is in the chat somewhere that I saw. We need to have active listening skills. We may have a positive conversation. We may not be having a difficult conversation. This didn't say we're holding a difficult conversation. We're having annual performance conversations. So just by the nature of it, we're starting to see, by breaking down the intrinsic elements of it, it could just be that we need to have emotional intelligence and active listening, but we have to know how to respond, and we have to be able to understand the combination of things so that we respond accordingly. So if it's a positive response, we're sharing in a positive way, and maybe we're giving examples. If it's that we need to provide some constructive feedback, we're presenting the information, and then maybe we're doing it in what they call the sandwich version, where you give a compliment, you tell them about the constructive thing, and then you give some helpful guidance on how to improve that, and then you give another kind of like compliment to sandwich it together. Now that's a technique. So that might be one microlearning. But we also said, where you said, Robin, there's, active listening, there's emotional intelligence. Those might be other microlearning products. We might actually create a campaign that helps us to focus on their germane pieces that build to having an annual conversation. So we might think about a learning journey that drips out that information in microlearning products. So you're about to do annual reviews 2025, and that's the microlearning campaign. And so we're looking at it from that point of view. Now you've been through, and this again, so it's performance. We're now reminding the managers, hey, you've done this before. But Robin, what if there's a new manager? Wow, guess what microlearning can be? It can not only be brand new training for somebody that's never done, but it can also be performance. That means it can be skill and performance in one microlearning campaign. Think about that. You just targeted two different audiences with the same product if you've designed it effectively.
Robin,
Yes.
can you put the scenario up again? Someone
Yes.
asked for it,
Sure.
and I was,
Absolutely. That's
thank
okay.
you. I was just looking for an opportunity to bring
Nope.
that to them.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
And while we're here, there was a question that I think maybe we should answer now. And that
Sure.
question is, what's the goal of the micro learning? More reviews done or less hurt feels because the action should drive the tasks?
That's a good question, but what you're asking in some sense, so, okay, wait, let me try to reverse engineer this. You're asking what's the goal of even creating the microlearning in the first place, I think is what's going on. So it's in the statement. They want microlearning to prepare the annual performance conversations. Whatever goal is behind it, whether it's we want more consistency because maybe there was this, let's say it can be a variety of reasons. It could be sentiment opinion of managers across the board is that nobody gives any helpful feedback on an annual conversation. So maybe they're trying to move the measure on sentiment points with the managers. It could be that it's a new initiative and they're trying to change the culture across the organization on how they provide feedback. It could just be that they want to better support the managers because the manager said that they feel ill supported when it comes to annual reviews and that they wish that they had a more performance support at that time. So it could be one of any one of those things. It could be tied to something more of a KPI or which would be, well, I think the one example I gave, I apologize, would be more of a strategic overarching organizational goal, not necessarily a KPI. So it could be any one of those three things. It could be an organizational goal. It could be something towards a KPI or KSA or OKR. I know that was a lot of acronym soup, but everybody does different measures in different organizations. Or it could just be, I don't need tested on it and I don't need to be measured on it. I just need to be supported. And so that might be the reason too. So it's a great question you're asking because it uncovers that microlearning doesn't always necessarily tie to something that needs to be measured because it's not necessarily that advanced in what it's trying to do other than to support somebody. Now, we could get into a whole philosophical thing like, why are we spending our time doing things for people if they're not tied to something? But I just wanted to make sure we were clear that that was a great question. It could go a couple different ways, or at least three different directions, but that doesn't really necessarily impact how you break down the content. Because at the end of the day, you're still preparing people to give feedback. And if the person who asked that has follow-up questions, happy to answer them if there's something that's sticking there for them. No pun intended.
Can this be applied to the learning outside of the transmission model? I'm not sure if it's regarding what you were just talking about or just the concept of the chunk strip build. I'm
I'm
not
not
sure.
fam- I'm not either. I apologize, Scott. I'm not familiar with the transmission model. If Scott, if you want to respond in chat, that's fine. I do want to make sure.
So are you seeing Diana's um, comment there? My thought is if the driver is, quote, we want more performance reviews turned in, unquote. Maybe it's a, quote, review submission, quote, so targeting the learning based on desired outcome.
It could be if that's what you wanted. It just all those pieces. When we do cases, obviously there's loose gray pieces around it to get people to think about the thing we're looking at today, which is how does cognitive load theory apply? How do we break down something that we want to turn into microlearning? And how do we focus that piece or pieces of microlearning products? So for example, and I'm not sure if this will help to address some of maybe what Scott was asking or Diane was, when we're talking about microlearning and we say, oh, we can create a campaign and then there's products in it, and maybe one product's on active listening and one product is maybe just on the model or process that they want you to present the feedback in, like what form, like there might be one on written and then there might be one on verbal. Those are different types of microlearning, right? We already went over microlearning types. We said there's knowledge types, there's skill types, and then there's performance types. So the microlearning campaign that we're talking about here is to prepare somebody for something. So that's performance. That's a microlearning campaign focused on performance. But we just heard that inside that microlearning campaign, individual products might be knowledge focused. Telling you what the framework is for having a helpful conversation that's constructive, that's knowledge. That's not you practicing it. That might be another microlearning product, which is skill-based. And then we make sure inside each product, so if we have knowledge, we're making sure that we've broken down that intrinsic model, because that's complex. We're breaking it down. We're chunking it in a way inside that microlearning and stripping away any of the extraneous that goes around it so that they can utilize that for performance. And then another microlearning product might be about skill, setting you up with a couple scenarios to play out that framework and practicing it. And then for some people, you might go through that microlearning campaign and you do that 2 weeks before performance reviews and go, I need to go back in and look at, I just want to practice, or I need to go back and look at the knowledge piece. I need to remind myself. The goal of the request, again, I appreciate what you're sharing in the chat about the case. Again, case studies are purposefully designed not to have all the answers so that we can generate great conversation like this. So if you have gotten hung up on the goal, think about it in the context of what you would do for your organization as opposed to what my made up scenario is, because this is a very real situation that does come up a lot, especially for leadership training and managerial training, as a lot of folks do utilize microlearning to help in the moment create performance pieces. But where some of the hang up becomes is they think performance, so they think everything has to be performance designed. And then that creates a lot of intrinsic load in the performance because they did not chunk it back down, strip away the extraneous to focus on maybe some of the knowledge that you need first, some of the skills that you need to practice so you can actually go perform that review. I hope that that makes sense. It's okay that, and I do apologize if that was confusing, but I was trying to get you to focus on the things that we were working on today. Are there other questions related to the scenario?
I don't believe there are any other
Okay.
questions. There's a comment in chat if you want to look at it, but it's not something that needs to be addressed right now.
Is that Anne's, or because I believe I
Yeah,
just addressed,
Anne's.
yes,
Yeah.
let me see if there's anything else in Anne's that I did not address, Anne. Okay. And again, thank you, Anne, for that feedback. I actually won't add the goal because part of that, again, is to have some nebulous ambiguity around it. So you're focused on the things that we were focused on today for the teachable pieces. I was stripping away the things that I needed because I was chunking it down to the thing I wanted everybody to focus on if I wanted to reapply back what I was just talking to you all about. Okay, well, if that is it, I know that that kind of puts us a little before time, but that was my presentation for you today. I did want to leave time, though, if you had some other questions that were not specific to the example I gave you, but you wanted to revisit something about cognitive load or the fact that working memory is not your short-term memory, because that is very important. Remember that extraneous load should not be confused with attention and distraction. Extraneous load is distracted design, but it's not the distraction of your environment. The context of a learner is something we did not address today. That is something larger than what I could give you today in conversation. So what I've given you is the base recipe. If anything, if you walk away today and go back and look at your microlearning and say, hey, I think I was trying to create a skill-based piece of microlearning, but I put too much intrinsic things in here, or, oh, I should break this in half because it's actually half skill, half knowledge. You're doing a one step better for your individuals at your organization. On distracted design, yes, I'm going to go back on the distracted design for you all. So that would be extraneous. So distracted, and that's Scott. Okay, Scott. So what we're looking at is the middle piece. That's the Tootsie Roll. That's our melted sticky friend. It's unnecessary effort. So think about bells and whistles in your designs. Now, a lot of microlearning authoring tools can be pretty clean, but if we're e-learning developers that have moved into microlearning creation, sometimes we still have like long form e-learning design going on. So think about every piece is intentional at that moment. Do we need to have bedded music? Do we need to have rollovers? Because even sometimes click on everything on the screen to learn can be extraneous. When we're doing microlearning, we're trying to really distill it down, chunk the information, strip away anything that's not getting them right at the information, because all we have is a handful of moments with them in microlearning. So they don't need to be distracted by all these bells and whistles in the design. So I was giving very glaring examples today of what sometimes we get, which is a journey into learning, which is this is the culture and this is the history. But we really just wanted you to know this is how you use our HR system. how do you feel about background music and videos? That uses a lot to try and cover sound errors. I, I, I don't want to, Diana, I think one of those things that makes total sense because maybe those, like maybe it's I don't know, like an air conditioner or something, or maybe there was coughing in the background, and those things can also pass off. Um, I would say if your editor is very good, and I'm assuming they are, they probably use it as what's called bedded music so that it's a little quieter. And not distracting to the information, but sometimes too much can be distracting. So, depending on if they can remove or dampen the noise in the background, you may want to think about maybe removing that if it's not helping. And it might be something that you ping your learners about. Ask them, like, is that distracting? You know how you do those like rater scores at the end. The I want to say NFS, but I think it's NPS rating scores. But anyway, it's a good question. I don't think it's right or wrong.
So the
Talk
the next question, do you have a recommendation of the number of topics to include in a micro learning or only one?
So we're using the word microlearning a couple different ways. So here's another piece of knowledge that if you did not know this, microlearning gets used three different ways when people are talking. So when I say a microlearning campaign, I'm talking about a series of microlearning products that you put together. Um, Microlearning, depending on what you're trying to achieve, maybe one microlearning product does the trick. Sometimes, like in the example I was showing as the scenario, it might be that you need multiple microlearning products to produce or elicit the outcome you want, which is maybe consistency and feedback to the employees during annual review. So it all depends on what you're asking about. Microlearning, when we're talking about it, people will use it conceptually. They'll talk about it from the standpoint of purpose and potential. Microlearning will solve our problem. Some people talk about microlearning as a method. We will drip it over time. So, and we will put it in an LMS. We will send it out in an email. That is talking about microlearning as a method. And when we're talking about it as a product, a tangible, that's the thing we're interacting with. Is it a video? Is it an e-learning? Is it an infographic? So when we use the word microlearning, be mindful that there are three different ways that we might actually be utilizing it, not just us, our stakeholders and our colleagues. And that can sometimes make a little crosshair of confused expectations. And then I saw a question on, it was about distraction and increasing oh, I see it here. Can you talk a little bit more about extraneous load and how it relates to attention? So, extraneous load on the attention side of things is just how do I pay attention to what's on the screen? And so it's a visual and it's usually an auditory thing. So, the question that Diane was asking about the music is the music actually making it hard for me to hear the salient points from the person talking? Is the music on this? Why is there music on a screen that I need to read? The screen is now distracting me because it's playing music. Or so that decreases your attention to the germane information. So we need to quiet that noise to help the person just focus on the words on the screen or focus on the words being spoken. Attention and distraction outside of that would be anything in your environment around you. So, like if my cat came up and jumped in my lap, that is distracting me in a different way. And that is not extraneous. That is not related to cognitive load theory. Extraneous is about your design distractions. The other distractions are your context. Context has 5 dimensions to it. And that's done by Tessimer and Ritchie, but there's 5 dimensions to your context, which have to be considered as well, because most of us create microlearning for people to do things in the flow of work or at their seat, not usually away. So that's another topic that we could talk about, but we don't have the time for. But context and the distractions in your context can also take away and make it harder for you to keep attention to what you're learning, not just the extraneous design of the microlearning.
Couple more questions. Do you think all learning should really employ micro-learning techniques, especially weeding out extraneous load?
Well, if um, Yes, because it's a yes, because microlearning is just a microscopic or a microcosmic way of looking at what we do in large. So e I'm teaching and talking about this through a microlearning lens. If I was teaching instructional design or the learning sciences right now today to folks, I would still be talking about these things in conjunction with long form training as well. So microlearning just gives me an opportunity to kind of dial the lens in and give you a microscopic view of a challenge that we have in designing learning in general. It's just magnified when we're doing it in microlearning format because we're asking a lot more of an individual in a short amount of time. So if we design like we traditionally do, and we're not giving that space and time or the environment's not conducive, think about where that information goes. I get texted 3 times in a day to be reminded by something. But if I've got too many things in my working memory going on, the demands of my job, the urgency of no electric, the pet being sick, that type of thing, I'm not going to remember anything from that microlearning. But if I took 45 minutes of an e-learning, I probably would remember a bit more of that than I would the microlearning. That's why when you're asking that question, I can say to you, we should be doing it anyway, because cognitive load theory is not specific to microlearning. It is global or universal to all learning design. So that was kudos. I wish I could give you a candy bar. That was a fantastic question. Actually, everybody that's been asking these awesome questions deserves candy in my world, but I can't give it to you, unfortunately. Are there more
Oh,
questions? Because I'm kind of,
there's a couple more questions. One that is pretty complicated, and quite honestly, I'm not sure if we can handle it in the last couple of minutes, but how do you recommend talking to SMEs or content providers who want everything covered and don't have the interest of the learners, specifically about the performance review piece? If the best practice for reducing extraneous would be to remove a motivational video that doesn't contain any instruction, how do you start that conversation with the CEO?
oh my goodness, I can't see that question anymore.
You,
Whoever asked that, I adore you, because this is the
you
bigger challenge.
You have the same name and it's Robin and it's spelled the same way. So you're
Oh,
kindred spirits there.
I was going to say it was me peppering in a really difficult question to make myself look really intelligent. But Robin, wow, that is one big smarty pack to unpack. So you're right. So one of the reasons why I do these presentations is, one, to inform the learning designers, because you are the frontline advocates for the people in the job role. So I, again, without making Karen repeat the whole question again, if I'm unpacking pieces of that question, there are things that I'm trying to do. One is make you conscious, everybody on this call, I'm making you consciously aware of some of the challenges that microlearning presents, because microlearning gets reduced down to good, fast, and cheap. Like, we can do this fast, we can do it cheap, and it doesn't take us a lot of time. And we can put it in front of them. They'll see it one time and they'll be able to do it. And here's the reality: none of that's true. There is science and to prove it. So it's like, well, that's nice. Well, how do I tell my CEO that? So it goes back to some of the pieces where we were seeking those understandings of the stakeholders, like when we were saying, well, what's the goal? What's the purpose? Um, we need to find balanced ways. And yes, Karen's right. I'm not going to be able to answer this all in this meeting. So please, folks, if you want to link in with me, please link in. But what I'm trying to do again is advocate for you to understand these pieces. And then, given what you're being asked by your leadership, is be able and be comfortable to be a trusted advisor, to consult back and say, that's not exactly going to be successful. How would you like to invest your money? So if they're a monies or a numbers person, how do you want to invest your money for success? How do you want to invest the time of the L&D function to drive a different number for you from a KPI or strategic outcome standpoint? I have some ideas about that, and I can tell you the challenges that we will face. And that's where you get to talk to them a little bit, maybe not like I've talked to you all today. You have to talk a little learning science to get them to get there, but you can also put it into context that help them understand. So, somebody doesn't learn their job in a day. So why would you expect somebody in 2 minutes out of their very busy day to, one, get what you told them in that microlearning, and then two, actively go back and do that in their job successfully? So if we have opportunity and time, my instant reaction is put some microlearning out there with the intent of what you want to show your CEO. Hey, here's a pilot that we did, and we did a group, and when we did onboarding, we tried out a new piece of product. We still have the traditional way of onboarding, but we wanted to try with this cohort a piece of microlearning. And here's the effect it had. We only showed them this piece one time, and this is how it was designed. Now, again, we can design it differently and then do another test and show these are the things that we discovered. This group didn't do so well. It didn't move anything. This group, we did it this way, and they actually reduced their time in being fluent in their job role, and we reduced their time in onboarding. So sometimes it's not just a conversation, it's having data to back it up, and use your microlearning to help you do that.
Wonderful. And then, what is the average length of a microlearning product and what qualifies as microlearning?
So I need to flip back around. That's really good questions. One, remember what qualifies as microlearning is all in how you're using it. The reason why I pointed out those three distinctions, people talk about it from a concept, a method, and a product standpoint, is because there is no one. And this comes out in my new book in January 2026. It's the whole reason why I wrote this book. Everybody's looking, and I'm not saying you that asked this question, folks look for a rule. They want a rule because then that rule moves everything forward, right? This is the rule. I'm following it and everything should work. That's not the reality of learning. We know this for a fact because everybody learns differently. Otherwise, all learning rules would work equally for everybody and everybody would be fine. That's not the truth of it. So what qualifies as microlearning is something that is 1 to 2 objectives, usually just one, focused on the germane piece that you're trying to teach. And it's typically something actionable. I didn't say testable, actionable. That means you're trying to bring it back into the context of work. So how are you giving them the opportunity to apply that knowledge, recall that knowledge? Because showing is more than knowing. If we want to just put things in an LMS and test it, that's great. That's not them showing you that they know it. That's where microlearning has the opportunities to help you show what they know because you're typically giving it to them on the job. So from the what qualifies from microlearning standpoint, again, it's all in how you're using the term, the duration of it. I've seen pieces of microlearning 15 minutes long. Again, if it's one objective and it needs that space and you've done all the chunking, stripping, and building, and it's still 15 minutes, it's still a piece of microlearning. We don't, you know what I mean? Define it for your organization. That would be my encouragement. Make sure you understand the terms well enough, these foundational pieces I talked about. The Learning Guild has great articles that I wrote on all the things I just said to you. So if you need that and you need to link with me, linked on LinkedIn again, so that I can share those things with you. But I need to time myself out because I know Karen has things to say. But thank you for the questions.
Thank you. We have come to the end of our time, and someone did ask for additional microlearning resources. And if you go to the Guild website, there's a search bar. Type in microlearning, type in Robin DeFelice, or combination, and you will get her resources. Plus, we do have other resources for microlearning. Go ahead and look in the sponsored library and the online events archive. We have a lot of things on microlearning there. And then aside from that, Robin, where else can people look for microlearning resources?
Well, there's the book Microlearning Short and Sweet that I co-authored with Dr. Carl Kopp. And actually, Carla Torgeson is another great microlearning resource too. She has a great, it's called the MILE framework for those that are looking for something to help you design microlearning. I don't have her book in front of me, but she's also a great asset as well. And of course, if you're looking again for me, LinkedIn for microlearning. I'm trying to think of other places to go for microlearning. ELB has in their authoring tool a great microlearning builder if you're looking for a way to author a little differently as well.
There we go. We have some resources for you. I hope you take advantage of them. And we love the fact that you've been great here, very engaged audience. It's wonderful. And Jennifer has put in those resources from ELB in chat for microlearning. So you've got that right in front of you. Thank you so much, Robin, for putting this together for us. And very much thank ELB Learning, who actually sponsored this webinar and brought you this great content. So please give them a round of applause as well. And everyone, have a good rest of your day.